Let this be a reminder to you all that this organization will not tolerate failure.
The side of the federal building has been blown off. Jesse?
They believe they were part of a CIA project called MK Ultra.
Just like a segment of society that is not living in reality.
In a certain sense, we're kind of a little bit more Israel's vassal state.
There are police chiefs facilitating prostitution networks.
Do you understand? It's all in your head. It's your move.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Morning Dump. My name is, of course, Austin Picard from the Underclass Podcast. Basically, I figured this morning we could kind of piggyback off of the past couple live streams that we've had, which, of course, is what's up, my brother? How's it going? Well, by the way, I should mention the fact that if you didn't notice, I'm sure you did. That was a brand new intro from Lainey, who has done significant work for the Tower Gang homies, and always comes correct with some legitimate edits. So shout out to Lainey for making that for me for the morning dumps here, to kind of I guess just differentiate from whenever plus it's, as far as the vibe itself, it's kind of a little bit more tuned toward the morning time, so that's kind of nice in itself. But other than that, it's a little bit different than whenever we do Already Dead, so we're not using the same edit as well. So yeah, it was me, but I appreciate you, my friend. So I figured this morning we could first of all discuss some interesting breaking news that Jose had sent over to me actually just recently in the past few minutes about the South Korean president allegedly being arrested, right? And I think this has happened within the past 24 hours. So it looks like we have quite a few different things that we could discuss this morning. I was thinking maybe a little bit of a conversation about biometrics and kind of this dystopian reality of the 15-minute cities that we've been very much focusing on recently, especially considering the path of these fires. And I've been, of course, the conspiracy has been for quite some time surrounding, the areas and the locations of the fires. They always tend to fall on that path, on that map, on that the interesting high-speed rail that is in the making, as far as there's like a billion, 100, maybe even $300 billion plan of creating this high-speed rail line all the way, connecting San Francisco to Los Angeles to San Diego, sort of thing, and it will, of course, usher through and facilitate that same exact goal set and agenda benchmarks as far as the 15-minute cities in regard to the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. So that is coming down, well, I would say just it's probably just right around the corner. And they've usually achieved far more than we're aware of. Right. So I think that's something that we always have to consider. And if you just, again, you overlay that map of the high speed rail line with the maps of the fires, and it's uncanny. And the same goes for in other various, internationally, as far as affecting Australia and all these other kind of targeted areas, right, to usher through these 15-minute smart cities. So Yeah, I'm not at all shocked that that is kind of playing out before our eyes. But yeah, anyway, I figure we could at least start with, because if you do remember the martial law attempt that was made by President Yoon in South Korea not too long ago, and yeah, so there's been some significant civil unrest in regard to South Korea and the domestic strife that is occurring over there, and so it very much falls in line with a lot of different things that are happening on this global international chessboard, uh, really gearing up for a much wider, broader conflict, I believe, in the upcoming years. Specifically, I'm sure we will make some very significant steps toward that goal within a year's time. So, especially considering, this transitionary period and the upcoming inauguration, and you're realizing that many of these individuals who've been tapped by the incoming administration are truly, yeah, most of them, it's either a PR strategy for the incoming administration to kind of have a political victory for public relations in general, and those individuals won't that are at least at least might be a sort of positive, I don't know, maybe alternative, right, than what we've been dealing with, but still, right, like if you haven't yet noticed, there's this very significant element of Christian Zionism. I think it's more a mask that's being worn to kind of um, really, well, mask the intentions of the actual elite special interest groups that are very much focused on the Zionist project of the Greater Israel project, which plays perfectly into this kind of globalist framework again, because we're if you haven't noticed, I think that the establishment very much utilizes um, our greatest ally as a way to kind of, like, in many ways they use Israel to achieve certain things that, right, on the world stage would be far more difficult to sort of achieve, right, and otherwise. So we kind of provide this blanket defense for Israel to achieve those things on our behalf, and then we point to Israel, and again, this is no defense of Israel. Clearly, the state of Israel is something that I am not at all in favor of, but I'm only considering this because it's again, when you have overlapping benchmarks and agenda items that tend to coalesce and uh, and sort of offer the same, you know, conclusive path, right? This path toward the same destination that we ultimately can't seem to right pivot away from. It seems almost inevitable. So I think that much of what is playing out foreign policy wise, in regard to a lot of these various things taking place, especially considering any sort of, change in the status quo when it comes to the prominent power positions running these various international governments. Um, yeah, President Yoon's arrest is worth acknowledging, no doubt in my mind. So let's briefly just kind of bring this in. I'll share it with you, and we'll go through this Al Jazeera article for just a moment, and then I had a few other things that I thought would be very important to bring to the table as far as like clips kind of reinforcing a few of the things that I had just mentioned in regard to, unfortunately, what I believe to be the incoming policy position toward the state of Israel. So, and by the way, I had mentioned this yesterday. I don't remember if it was privately or if it was or if it was on the show, but I had told I had told it's going viral again and kind of making the rounds as far as um when Tim Pool kind of reacted to the USS Liberty being brought up on the show. And I just thought it was so hilarious because, again, it shows this either your entirely compromised asset, or this cognitive dissonance, this inability to you know f- just face the realistic paradigm that you find yourself in, and identify the true individuals within the prominent positions of power, right? And that is what I think is the the real difficulty for most people, is sort of identifying the power structure, which is very clandestine in nature, and kind of in 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 a covert way. It's manufacturing this political theater to maintain, this hidden image, right? And unfortunately, so no one will be held accountable, and the system itself cannot be restructured. And that makes all the sense in the world. How else do you consolidate more and more power? You can't reveal the hidden framework, right? And that is all just how they remain in the shadows, operating in the darkness. It's it's an unfortunate state of reality. But anyway, if you're wondering at all, before we get into that article on the South Korean president, here is the changing of the guard really proving to not be so different in my mind already, and it hasn't even happened. So let's listen in to the World Economic Forum CEO, very pleased that Trump has committed to join Davos in 2025 in their upcoming meeting, their annual meetings, which decide our fate.
We are very pleased that President Trump will join us, as I said, in his first week as president, live in Davos and in dialogue with CEOs also. We have been told that the administration wants a broad footprint towards the end of our meeting. I'm then talking about Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. As we know, the inauguration happens on Monday, the 20th, and the Senate will probably start the process of then also clearing new secretaries, confirming new secretaries Monday afternoon. So towards the end, we do expect even additional high-level representation from the Trump administration. So we're very pleased by that, because we know that there is a lot of interest, of course, among our participants, also the rest of the world, to decipher and understand the policies of the new administration. So it will be a very interesting week.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Just what an interesting window into the world of global politics, right? But it's just far more than that. Oh yeah, this was another thing I intended to mention, only because it's very fitting, right? And as Aaron Mate says here, a fitting send off in regard to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, of course, being screamed at by while giving a speech at the Atlantic Council, and he's called Bloody Blinken, Secretary of Genocide, and I just think that is unfortunately far too accurate, and will. But keep in mind this fact that it seems as if this is being this narrative, as far as the narrative being acknowledged in regard to the deliberate and deliberate murder of children and innocent civilians within the context of the war in Gaza, and it's sort of being acknowledged and exposed at this very moment, which is very strange, right? Especially considering the fact that as the incoming Trump administration, this sort of changing of the guard, as I said, and this new, well, what happens is that they tend to try and kind of pin certain, I would say certain what the Biden administration should really be guilty of, right? And considered to kind of have pinned on their, as far as they're responsible for these policies, right? In regard to allowing this genocidal, policy to continue. Well, of course, they kind of are getting a pass in many ways because it's been denied by the mainstream media for such, really an extended period of time at this moment, to where it's been just utterly denied in the public, as far as being presented to the public, it's being utterly denied that has been a priority and a technique of clearly just committing war crimes on a daily basis. So anyway, it's very interesting, to say the least, that as Trump is taking office, they're finally sort of admitting this out loud, that these human rights violations have been taking place. And so again, something worth at least bringing up, especially when you consider this very heavy, representation of over-representation, I would say, of Christian Zionists, and this, this attempted fulfillment, really a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways, right? And reestablishing the third temple, and and truly ushering through the Antichrist in many ways, if you actually look at the prophecy itself. And interesting that is a goal. But yeah, so once again, if you don't know about the Balfour Declaration, and that the Rothschilds legitimately helped found the state of Israel and caused the vast majority of this conflict, then you haven't been paying attention, unfortunately. But that is how things sort of happen on the world stage, and none of it is ever by accident when it comes to things of this magnitude, I would say. So before I lose, we'll pivot right into that South Korean article, just as far as the South Korean president being arrested in right after we play this clip, because this is Pete Hegseth, right? He's the nominee for defense secretary, and we should listen to his personal philosophy in regard to the state of Israel.
Being a Christian Zionist, I'm not really sure why that is a bad thing. I'm a Christian. I'm a Zionist. Zionism is that the Jewish people deserve a homeland in the ancient Holy Land where they've lived since the dawn of history. Do you consider yourself a Christian Zionist?
Senator, I'm a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel and its existential defense, and the way America comes alongside them is a great ally.
Thank you. Because another protest of being a Christian Zionist.
Yes. So again, they just tell you out loud, right? They say it to our faces, and we just ignore them. It's just something that we have to acknowledge once and for all. Otherwise, this just will consistently proceed to head down the same exact path. And so, yeah, but it's okay, because Hillary Clinton, she would like to let everyone know that whoever's engaging in misinformation should be civilly or criminally charged, right? So that is the pipe dream for these elite oligarchs who would like to silence any sort of dissent in this upcoming dystopian, totalitarian, technocratic state. So of course, censorship is going to be ratcheted up in more ways than one. So hopefully these false alternatives that seem to be forming around this misconception of what freedom of speech even is at this point, right? You continue to see these digital gulags take really just kind of, it's all I've witnessed on Twitter, right, is just this stranglehold and shadow banning and things of that nature. So it's just overt censorship, as I've said before. And there's also just this unfortunate clear escalation taking place in the as far as the stage of foreign policy, right? the new theater of war that's always forming around these newly surfacing conflicts that have always been kind of just, in my mind, it's always covertly being facilitated with these NGOs and the intelligence community infiltrating these these foreign states and causing chaos, sort of in this domestic gladio type of strategy. But of course, this is something that they're very well versed in, so it's nothing new. And so before I get carried away, let's actually read through that South Korean president being arrested, as far as the Al Jazeera article, and see if there's anything worthwhile here before we pivot to a story I wanted to tell you about the Elm Guest House and Spartacus International. And it's a horrific story. It seems like it's par for the course once again for a lot of these abuse networks. But again, the implication is very prominent, powerful individuals within the framework of the state being, again, implicated in a network of sadistic abuse, which always goes to show that the prominent currency when it comes to power brokers tends to be blackmail, right? So anyway, South Korea's President Yoon arrested over short-lived martial law attempt. Investigators used ladders to climb into President Yoon's Suk-yeol's I don't know how to pronounce, compound after he failed to appear at his impeachment trial. South Korean investigators have arrested South Korea's impeached president over accusations of insurrection for briefly imposing martial law in a move swiftly overturned by the country's National Assembly. The Joint Investigation Headquarters executed an arrest warrant for President Yoon January 15th at 10:30 a.m. The authorities said in a statement on Wednesday, making Yoon the first South Korean president to be arrested while still in office. South Korea's Yonhap news agency reported that the deputy chief of Korea's Corruption Investigation Office, CIO, Lee Jae-sung, led questioning of Yoon inside an interrogation room with Yoon's legal representatives present. The CIO said Yoon would be held at Seoul Detention Center in Uwang. I don't know, maybe that's how you pronounce it, but following questioning, the Reuters news agency reported. In a pre-recorded video message released after his arrest, Yoon said he had made the decision to submit to questioning over his failed martial law bid to avert bloodshed. I decided to respond to the Corruption Investigation Office, Yoon said, adding that he did not accept the legality of the investigation but was complying to prevent any unfortunate bloodshed. South Korean investigators and police used ladders to climb into Yoon's residential compound earlier in the day after they were initially blocked by the Presidential Security Service, which barricaded the entrance using vehicles. Thousands of people, including supporters, had gathered outside Yoon's home, while a group of lawmakers from the governing Conservative People Power Party, PPP, and Yoon's lawyers had also attempted to prevent the arrest inside the presidential compound. Authorities now have 48 hours to question Yoon, after which they must seek a warrant to detain him for up to 20 days or release him. I'm interested to know the foreign policy implications here. Investigators began questioning the suspended president shortly after his arrest, but they said he had exercised his right to remain silent. He also withheld permission for the interview to be filmed. The CIO, which has a questionnaire of over 200 pages prepared for Yoon, told reporters it had no information on why he was refusing to talk. The standoff at Yoon's presidential residence came just hours after he failed to appear for the first hearing in his impeachment trial over his short-lived imposition of martial law on December 3rd. Patrick Falk, reporting for Al Jazeera from Seoul, said an estimated 1,000 police officers were involved in the arrest operation at the president's residence. The Corruption Investigation Office can hold him for a maximum of 48 hours. They then need to decide at that point whether or not to apply for a warrant to detain the president. It is not clear whether or not that will be necessary, but of course, it has been very difficult to get to this point. Yoon was not present at the opening of his impeachment trial on Tuesday, and South Korea's constitutional court had said that they needed him to be present. Now that he has been arrested, perhaps he will show up in court tomorrow. The operation on Wednesday was the second attempt by investigators to arrest Yoon. An earlier failed attempt ended after an hours-long standoff between authorities and Yoon's security team inside the presidential compound at the beginning of January. This kind of reminds me of Haiti. I think it was Haiti. But he was assassinated, wasn't he? I'm trying to remember now. I think that he was, I believe. Anyway, since then, Yoon had remained inside his hillside villa in Seoul for weeks in an effort to evade arrest. Yeah, and if I remember, that Haitian connection was, I believe they invaded the presidential palace and essentially, cooed him overnight, and had direct connections through like this. It was clearly like this elitist Western puppet that was playing as this playing the role as this, domestic oligarch, but having clear Western backing as far as the connections to overthrowing this regime, right? And so again, there were like deep ties within the intelligence community to that coup d'état that took place, and it was very much just like the Haitian president was assassinated. That's what I thought, yeah, and I just remember kind of in passing reading through what had taken place, but. I do remember that going through the details of that, there were direct connections to the intelligence community, again, through, I believe, how the mercenaries basically had, I'm pretty sure it was how they had procured the Toyota trucks or something that they had used, right? Which should remind you of ISIS anytime that comes up, right? Because, again, who provided ISIS with all their Toyota trucks? I believe it was the intelligence community and the U.S. State Department, but nothing to see here. While the UK is producing their beheading videos, but it's okay. We'll just accept it all at face value because there's a international Islamic terrorism threat. So, anyway, so let's finish this article. The impeached president's lawyers had said their client would not attend the impeachment hearing. Yeah, CIA gets a bulk discount on trucks. The impeached president's lawyers had said their client would not attend the impeachment hearing as he would be prevented from expressing his position freely due to ongoing attempts to detain him by authorities. What up, Fire Pixie? The hearing is being held after South Korea's National Assembly voted on December 14th to impeach Yoon over his imposition of martial law in a surprise late-night address on December 3rd. Very interesting. After first rising to public prominence as chief prosecutor of former South Korean President Park Geun, I don't know, I'm not even going to try, on charges of corruption in 2017, Yoon took office in May 2022. Now, this is interesting to me because it kind of reminds me of everything that's been happening in regard to what's the grooming gangs and all of the strange connections happening over in the UK in regard to their prime minister, and I believe having very strange connections to the prosecution of Jimmy Savile, the lack thereof as far as the prosecution of Jimmy Savile. And if I'm trying to find it here. Yeah, now Prime Minister Keir Starmer, right? He was in charge of prosecuting Jimmy Savile and and basically aided and facilitated in the cover-up, right? So I think that anytime you see those connections, it's very much in the vein of Alexander Acosta, right? Alex Acosta, being appointed as Trump's, what was it, Secretary of Transportation or some shit like that. And I'm trying to remember now what position he was given, but I do remember that, of course, he's the individual who presided over the Epstein, sweetheart deal, and was told he needed to back off because Epstein was protected by intelligence. And so again, he's sort of in his confirmation hearing when he was offered that position within this upcoming administration, not in this moment, but in Trump's original administration in 2016. I think it was around 2017 when Alex Acosta gave that statement. I can't quite recall, but anyway, it's very interesting to say the least, because knowing that these individuals don't rise to power by coincidence, right? They typically have proven their usefulness in the past. And so, again, all you have to do is point to an individual presiding over a federal cover-up such as that in regard to Epstein, of course, but then also considering Jimmy Savile, who we had to wait for him to die for any of that evidence to see the light of day. And yeah, people, there's a reason for that, because when you have that much dirt on that many powerful people, you either wind up dead, or you might be able to. Honestly, I'm very shocked that he effectively remained alive and in power and really unexposed throughout the course of Jimmy Savile's existence. But he's one of the most sadistic pedophiles that I've ever, as far as just read details about, and 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 those cases have been corroborated. I mean, he abused hundreds of young people, and he was so sadistic. He was a necrophiliac as well. Like, I think he had a very strange relationship with his old and dying mother. And then he, of course, ultimately was buried like he was a vampire at this very strange angle, and in this very ritualized manner. And it's he believed he was sort of a wizard, right? And yeah, it would blow your mind reading into Jimmy Savile. I'll have to do an episode on him at some point in the future, but for my own well-being, that will come later. But anyway, yes, I would say that basically this is probably as much as we need to read. Yeah, that's the end of the article as far as the South Korean connection here to the arrested president. But in regard to what I had just really been discussing in the context of Israel and the upcoming administration, it's a very unfortunate turn of events, and just what we have to acknowledge is that there's a clear, I would say there's a clear sign and effort being made to really confirm this upcoming administration's Zionist policies, as far as I would say to convince the ADL and the right, and as far as these AIPAC, right, these very influential lobbies, that the upcoming administration has Israel's best interests at heart. That is very clearly playing out. Especially, I know that there's talks of ceasefire, and there are reports that the incoming administration had also allegedly put pressure on Netanyahu to effectively work toward a ceasefire. But then I see that that's potentially just headlines making the rounds to attempt to provide some sort of justification and defense for what is truly about to occur. Because in reality, if you look at it, the Israeli finance minister is entirely against and in opposition to any sort of ceasefire deal, and says it's time for Israel to cleanse Gaza once and for all. And Dave DeCamp just wrote about this on antiwar.com in an article titled Smotrich. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name. Bezalel Smotrich, minister. So he's the Israeli finance minister. And on Monday, he expressed strong opposition to a hostage and ceasefire deal with Hamas amid reports negotiations are making progress, and said it was time for Israel to occupy and cleanse the entire Gaza Strip. The emerging deal is a catastrophe for the national security of the state of Israel. We will not be a part of a surrender deal with that. That would include releasing terrorist hostages, stopping the war, and dissolving its achievements that were brought with much blood and abandoning many hostages. So again, yeah, Dave DeCamp is phenomenal. He's one of the best around doing it. And if you don't follow his work at antiwar.com, and I think he does anti-war news, I think that's his podcast, but it's very good. It's like a daily wrap up kind of all the very incredibly important surfacing breaking news in regard to a lot of this foreign policy and the implications and consequences that are kind of, waiting in the wings, being ushered through, and as far as just a result of these horrific policies. So again, I think it's important to note that just the recycled tactic, the playbook being utilized once more in regard to the hostages, right? Because that just reminds me of the Reagan playbook, and I think Jimmy Carter, right, and where he's essentially behind the scenes, they had negotiated the hostages, but not until he took power, right? Not until the transition of power, where he took office in the administration, which because they did not want to allow the Carter administration to have a victory of any kind going into, the actual election. So it was very much, that within the framework of partisan politics, in the sense of playing the political game with the power brokers involved. So that's just how it is when you're dealing with this kind of, it's really like warring factions of the same cartel in many ways, right? It's a criminal syndicate, and that is how they function. And so it's legitimately what Dave Smith has said. I've loved it forever, but it's essentially that the state and government is just, the highest level of organized crime dressed up as a human rights organization. And it's extremely accurate in regard to how they conduct themselves on the world stage, geopolitically and just foreign policy wise. But so this individual, this Israeli finance minister, he also says, this is the time to continue with all our might to occupy and cleanse the entire strip, to finally take control of humanitarian aid from Hamas, and to open the gates of hell on Gaza until Hamas surrenders completely and all the hostages are returned. So, yeah, it's very clear that there is no true intention in winding down this conflict in any real significant way, especially if you consider this interesting article I'll share with you as well, because again, it kind of goes to corroborate a little of and add to the credibility of what I was just suggesting in regard to the incoming administration's Zionist policies. And really, if anything, it seems like there will be an escalation, right? So here, so extremist Israeli settler leaders invited as special guests to Trump inauguration. Jewish settlers believe incoming President Trump will help them illegally annex the occupied West Bank. A delegation of extremist Israeli Jewish settler leaders has been invited to participate in U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration next Monday in Washington. The delegation comprises Yesha Council Chairman and Benjamin Regional Council Head Israel Gans, Oranit Council Head of Peron Zamer, the Yesha Council CEO Omer Rashamim, and Samaria Regional Council Head Yossi Dagan. The group will attend the inauguration as official guests and will hold meetings with incoming administration officials and leaders from the U.S. Jewish and evangelical Christian communities. A similar delegation attended Trump's 2017 inauguration. Our objective is to strengthen existing connections and forge new ones. Washington's attention is elsewhere at present. Trump is focused on Greenland sovereignty matters, not Israel's concerns in Judea and Samaria. Timing is crucial. We must proceed strategically and appropriately, a council official told the Hebrew newspaper. The Yesha Council and other regional authorities that oversee illegal settlement activity in the occupied West Bank, which they call Judea and Samaria, have devoted considerable resources to cultivating relationships with Republican Party leadership in recent years. Gans and Dagan have worked closely with senior Republican officials, including organizing tours of the occupied West Bank for party officials. American genocidal nutjob Nikki Haley visited the occupied West Bank today, accompanied by settler leader Yossi Dagan and Likud MK Danny Denon, and then headed up to visit the northern border, where she wrote on an artillery shell, "Finish them." Very interesting. The Israeli settler movement enjoys strong influence in the U.S. Republican Party and with President-elect Trump. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his settler supporters have often compared Trump to the biblical Persian king Cyrus, who helped the Jews return from Babylon to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. During his first presidential term, Trump recognized Israeli sovereignty over the occupied Syrian Golan Heights. Israel has been illegally occupying the Golan since 1967 and occupied additional land there immediately after the fall of the Syrian government last month. Jewish settler leaders anticipate that Trump will help them achieve their goal of annexing the West Bank, which Israel also occupied illegally in 1967 and forcibly expelling its indigenous Palestinian population. What up, Abrogate D's? Good morning, brother. Good morning, screwed up Texas. Man, this is not at all outside my expectation, right? This is very much within kind of exactly the as far as the policy positions, this is very much what I was expecting. And so again, if you guys don't remember, on Already Dead, I think it was, I had mentioned in the past, not very long ago, just right the unfortunate reality that Miriam Adelson had really just paid Trump for his Israel policy, and yeah, that's the reason that he had originally, moved the embassy, right? So the expectation extends in part from a $100 million donation to his campaign from U.S. Israeli billionaire Miriam Adelson, which, of course, if you don't know, is the widow of Sheldon Adelson. And Sheldon Adelson, yeah, he's one of the most prominent and powerful, at least he was, kingmakers, Zionist kingmakers, casino moguls that you could ever imagine. He had a very, very, strong influence when it came to, let's say, he had a prominent part to play within the context of the Vegas shooting, right? And that's a notable, something very much worth mentioning. And if you haven't yet, go check out the Vegas shooting episode that I've covered, because I do mention Sheldon Adelson and the role that he played there. But let's finish this off as well. Dagan, who is close with Trump and a member of Netanyahu's Likud party, told Israel Hayom, years of relationship building with our newly elected American friends have created this pivotal opportunity for Israel, particularly its government, to achieve significant advances in strengthening our presence in the land of Israel. man, yeah, it looks like we are headed directly toward an escalation in many different theaters of war on the world stage at this very moment. And yeah, it seems as if that is all by design, and that these individual power brokers are just kind of, again, utilizing and exploiting the pendulum as it swings, and expecting us to sort of continue to play into this false framework of idolizing and worshiping politicians as if they ever have our best interest at heart, no matter where they are on the political spectrum. You cannot trust a statist. You cannot. And that is something that I'm very much aware of at this point. And I am under no false impression or misconception that we should put our blind faith into any, public official, right? So, yeah, it's time to kind of wake up to that naivete. And anyway, other than that, I would say there's something that I was really hoping we could get to, which it's this story about as I mentioned, the Elm Guest House, right? And I had read Eye of the Chicken Hawk, of course, and my plan was to do an episode about North Fox Island at some point here in the near future. But the fact of the matter is that it connects directly into, not only is the Francis Sheldon and the Spartacus Network involved in, this story, but also there's this, and the Oakland County child murders, by the way, which really was, I would say, what brought a lot of the attention, the public attention, at least, to this scandal. But it's very important to know that this Spartacus International and the Elm Guest House, this story provides us again with this very interesting, um, just another example that we can point to of prominent individuals in as far as power brokers in the political landscape being implicated in a sadistic abuse network. And again, this is much worse than it seems, and that is typically the case when you look at things like Kincora, right? And I've talked about this before whenever I'm discussing really Trump's kind of connections to special interest groups, which is a very unfortunate thing. But of course, when I read through The New Jerusalem, Zionist Power in America by Michael Collins Piper, it really kind of, I would say, it just sent home a lot of, drove home, I should say, it drove home a lot of the just a lot of these, really, like, you look at these dynastic family connections behind Trump, and right, that's what gives me pause and raises so much skepticism, is that you see this strange synchronicity when it comes to those individuals being involved at every level of the political theater aspect of, they are clearly the puppet masters behind the scenes pulling the strings, and these prominent political personas are just really the window dressing for these horrific policies in order for us to embrace them within this false misconception and this false framework within the duality of the political, partisan nature of the tribalism aspect of it, right? So I was talking to Jules last night privately, and it's that same scenario from Sebastian Junger's book Tribe, right? Which was like, what, going back, um, you can essentially trace the fact that really subconsciously we've been conditioned to be more concerned, right, with being excommunicated from the group than even death, right? So people say that, right, that interesting statement that there's a kind of a high percentage of people who would rather die than be forced to give a public, have to to give a speech in public, or because they clearly, you know, are very over anxious and have this conditioned anxiety within them when it comes to being out in front and having the spotlight on them, right? And it's kind of like, because you're running this risk that if anything goes wrong, you could be excommunicated from the group. And that in itself was almost worse than death, because it ultimately resulted in death. Um, and so, yeah, I just kind of always found it interesting that within that sort of theoretical notion, you know, you kind of come to find that most people have been conditioned, I would say the vast majority of us, to just go with the collectivist flow, to go with that, unfortunate, um, what typically becomes the mainstream narrative embraced by the vast majority. Um, yeah, most people, it feels threatening to kind of embrace an idea that is apart from the norm and apart from the average, a delicate sensibility. And so you kind of run into this strange circumstance where you would rather embrace bad ideas in order to be a member of the group, remain a member of the group in this collectivist mindset, really, that's been conditioned into us. Um, and that we have to break free from that, honestly, because we have to be able to stand on our foundational principles, I think. And if we haven't yet isolated and understood and reflected on what is ethically, just as far as like these, again, you have to have this ethical foundation in place. Otherwise, you're running this risk of adopting these horrific ideas and facilitating these unfortunate agendas. And that's what I'm always most concerned with. But yeah, so before I get carried away, I think the main point of what I was going to say was that um good for you, my friend. Um that's all you can do is stand on principles. And that's what I've attempted to do myself, is kind of, you know, I really have attempted to, in my mind, I've said this before. I really, on a daily basis, I try and center myself and ask for my heart to be in the right place, to have the best of intentions, my mind to work efficiently and effectively, right? And it's almost become a mantra, but I'm I've really never been more grateful, right? And I have this strange gratitude that I'm just consistently saying, you know, thank you, God. Right. And like, I don't know why, but it's something that I'm consistently saying over and over again, because I just feel this very overwhelming sense of gratitude in this moment. And at any time I get lost in attempting to control the outcome, it reminds me of the serenity prayer. And I remember, um, that it's kind of funny that someone brought up last night on Already Dead their issues with substance abuse, because if you've ever gone to any sort of substance abuse meetings or anything of that nature, typically they begin the meetings with the serenity prayer. And it was something that stuck with me and resonated with me, and will till the day I die, I think, because it's, again, the philosophical mantra, the perspective that you're granted through this kind of through this psychological process. God grant me the right, um, grant me the ability to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Right, and that just, again, it's just this philosophical mantra that you should embrace. You should adopt this, if only for the sake of sort of the intentions, the 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 intentions being pure. Right. I think that is what matters most of all. So anytime I'm attempting to assess the character of an individual, I really try and boil it down to what are their intentions, and are they sort of, most of them, most people, it seems, have just been manipulated and coerced and conditioned into adopting very, very evil ideas, and but yet they've of course been convinced that it's all within this framework of morality and progress. And so that is why I refer to the upside down, inverted moral landscape, because it's exactly the design that is extremely seductive. And if you're not yet alert and aware of these techniques, then very easy to fall into the preordained outcomes, and these unfortunately manufactured crises, and these just, yeah, it's what amounts to an ideological trap. It's subversion in every way, and philosophically as well. And so I am skeptical of any individual within the framework of the system as it's structured today, because you don't, again, you cannot rise to these powerful positions by accident. And so yeah, you're absolutely right, my friend. They are new age cults in many ways, and it's kind of interesting when you you go into, what's his name, um, Bill W, the guy that wrote the AA book, and yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of different interesting connections there with the 12-step programs, but yeah, you guys definitely like, share, and subscribe. Jose, what's up, brother? We got Jose in the chat. Um and yeah, subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the Rumble. Um share these episodes if you appreciate them at all, and yeah, hit that like button for sure, because it does help us in the algorithm and everything. But beyond that, man, it does seem like a lot of this a lot of this foreign policy that is extremely relevant and taking form in this very time, in this very moment, tends to fall perfectly within that greater Israel project. And I think that's really within the globalist framework. And so it's not necessarily that this is where I think there's a misconception in regard to the state of Israel, as far as uh, you know the state of Israel sort of being considered, you know, the true power on the world stage, conducting these policies with no real accountability. That's true, but at the same time, it's like none of it is possible without, of course, the U.S. State Department, and so I think it's much more plausible for myself that the state of Israel would just more so function as a tool of the U.S. State Department. I know that there are many different examples of sexual blackmail operations by Mossad that have compromised a lot of American public officials, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, that APAC controls our entire government, right? Because I truly do believe that is created as a really as just a sort of a way to derail our understanding of how this kind of, uh, let's see, what at the beginning of the AA book, it talks about the Rockefellers and how their money made AA possible. That's so funny. I'd have to go back and reread it's been so long. And yeah, I was a lot younger, so whenever I was kind of going through all of that, but it had a very deep impact on my life, I'll tell you that much. And so it would be very interesting to go back through with this kind of um 2020 vision in hindsight, and look back at some of the strange conspiracies in regard to the recovery community. I wouldn't at all be surprised if there's a significant hidden hand involved. But because it is very strange, and there are a lot of new age philosophies involved. But yeah, let's see. I had a couple other things I wanted to mention before we wind down here, and excuse me. So I really wanted to address the fact because I had actually someone had really kind of questioned the reality of the Odinist connections to the Delphi murders. And, I can understand why, because the mainstream narrative has entirely kind of abandoned any coverage when it comes to the ritualistic aspect of the Odinist signatures and on the crime scene. But as far as the Delphi murders are concerned, and so I think that first of all, I should say go and listen to The Real True Detective, the episode that I did, where the latter half of that episode, I spend I think over an hour talking about the Delphi murders and explaining a lot of those details. So it is really important if you have any questions about the Odinist connections to go back through it because I couldn't quite, you know, do it do the I'm just saying I think I'm very proud of the case that I made as far as these Odinist signatures, but um yeah, I still think it's something that is important to at least recognize in regard to the clear and overt Odinist connections, but I don't want to kind of rehash too much of what we've covered before. So I should first say that it's very interesting once you go through the actual memorandums in the court documents. That's what you should look through, and that will provide you with this understanding that there are individuals directly involved, named in a Vinlander group, which of course is this. The Vinlanders are this strange kind of it's like a almost a neo-Nazi white supremacist vein of this Odinist belief system. It's a strange ideology, but it's very much involved with the Delphi case, especially considering individuals like a particular Odinite from Logansport by the name of Brad Holder, who he posted social media images mimicking the very runes, these ancient pagan runes found at the crime scene. And the crime scene, of course, unreleased and unknown to the general public, even to this very day. So it's, to say the least, you have, so consider this. Who was Brad Holder? He's an Odinite whose son Logan had been dating Abby. All right, Abby and Libby. Remember, those are the two girls who were murdered in this ritualistic fashion in the Delphi murders. And so think about that. Brad Holder, one of the individuals potentially involved, was an Odinite whose son Logan had been dating Abby. Brad Holder's social media posts seemingly taunted the very police that refused to fully investigate him. The defense believes that the court will be shocked at the number of clues or Easter eggs both before and after the murders. That Holder openly posted on his Facebook page that pointed the finger to his involvement in the murders. So, however, a fact that is simply mind-blowing to the defense is that Brad Holder was never considered a suspect in the murders of Abby and Libby. State Trooper Jerry Holman, one of the law enforcement officers in charge of organizing and investigating the Delphi murders, claimed in his August 10th, 2023 deposition that Brad Holder was not even ever really a suspect. So, police reports written near the time of the murders reveal that Jerry Holman is telling the truth. Brad Holder was cleared as a suspect quickly on March 16th, 2017. And again, remember, the murders took place February 13th, 2017. On March 1st, 2017, Tony Leggett stated in a report that there were no leads required concerning Brad Holder, meaning that it was not necessary for law enforcement to continue to look for leads related to him. So, this is very interesting considering the compromised position of the Unified Command involved in the case, I think, especially considering the fact that, throughout the document, references are made to the Unified Command, and this was the leadership of the Delphi murder investigation, which The Unified Command consisted of law enforcement from a variety of entities, local, state, and federal. Unified Command were overseers of the entire investigation operation. So, Odinism is the pagan religion referenced throughout the court documents. Its followers are called Odinites, of course. And Odinites are enamored by Viking Nordic culture. Of course, they worship this ancient pantheon of Nordic gods. And evidence supports that at the crime scene, these murdering Odinites left behind obvious signatures, symbols in the form of runes, as I said before. Ansuts, I believe, in the shape of the letter F, was one of them. These runes were formed with sticks fashioned with tree branches and painted using the blood of Liberty German. So, again, and this is not by accident when you notice the position of the girls' bodies. So sticks and tree branches were deliberately, carefully, and proficiently placed on each girl in a certain arrangement, mimicking certain runes. At least one of the branches appeared to have its end cut off cleanly by some type of tool, like an electric saw, which of course provides proof of a preconceived plan, which is very important to acknowledge as well. And so additionally, the blood of Liberty German was used as the paint to mark a tree with a rune that looks similar to the letter F, as I said. With a simple Google search, these runes would be identifiable as one of the many calling cards of this pagan religious cult. And again, it's called the Vinlander Group, and they are Odinites. Yet law enforcement in charge of the Delphi investigation seemingly and quickly abandoned the obvious correlation between the crime scene and Odinism, despite an obscene amount of evidence linking Odinism to the crime scene, and even in spite of powerful evidence linking specific Odinites in and around Indiana to the murders. As I was mentioning, Brad Holder. Also, the court will learn in his affidavit, excuse me, in his affidavit for search warrant, that Sheriff Liggett failed to inform Judge Diner that nothing, absolutely nothing, links Richard Allen to Odinism or any religious cult. Oh my God. All right. We got an ad popping up on 13 WTHR. Yeah. The Odinite material is in one of my videos. It is, as I was just saying, it's in the episode called The Real True Detective. And the first hour I spend talking about the Hosanna Church scandal, which was really kind of the primary case that influenced the first season of True Detective. And then I transition and pivot into the Delphi murder story around, I believe it's the hour 5 mark. So it's an hour and 5 minutes in, I think, is around when I transition. And yeah, that I think is very important to go and listen back to that if you have the time, because I think it's extremely important. But yeah, that first hour, I understand, my friend, having trouble getting past that first hour. I don't blame you at all. I was kind of hoping that that wouldn't be the case, but I was very concerned that due to the excruciating detail of some of the most sadistic abuse you could ever imagine, and then it being driven home sort of in uh, like I said, very, very deep detail. Um, it's startling, it's shocking, and it's something that stays with you, And so I will not blame you at all if you if you want to skip through to the transition period to Delphi, because I do think I understand it's something that is just too much exposure to details such as that, right? Especially considering the vulnerability of the victims. It's just hard to take. So I don't blame you at all, my friend. But yeah, check it out, and I appreciate you you being interested at all. But so anyway, what I think though is worthwhile is that when you're dealing with a clear and utter cover up, federal cover up when it comes to, you know, especially a ritualized murder with a cult group involved. But not only that, direct connections to authorities and officials within the prison system, and so it makes a lot of sense that people would be wondering, where are you even getting this information on Odinism being involved? Because it was never, as far as the murders of Libby and Abby, it had never been publicly linked to Odinism before the claims had been made in the memorandum in the court documents. So it's just, it makes a lot of sense why, of course, most people have not been exposed to it, because unfortunately the judge ruled that none of this evidence could be presented to the jury. And so it was essentially case closed, because how could you even provide your own defense if you can't bring forward all the exculpatory evidence that was, you know, the it was attempted to be withheld in the first place, which it for the most part was, and withheld by the prosecution, which is just it's unheard. I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's something that is really illegal, honestly. And so yeah, and then the way that prosecutor McClelland, in the fashion that he kind of provided this evidence, is it's clearly um in bad faith, right? And something that we have to understand, because that's the reason why this alternative narrative that's far more plausible, that consists of the Odinist signatures and these named individuals that clearly were a part of the crimes. um yeah, it paints an entirely different picture, but again, it's something that is much easier to wrap your head around, and so if you're considering, and by the way, I've mentioned it many times now in regard to this story, but as far as the federal task force that was created just after the murders had taken place, with their sole purpose being to investigate the Odinist signatures within the context of the crime scene. So yeah, and then to follow that through and witness what happens to 2 out of the 3 federal investigators on that task force, and how one was inevitably murdered and executed outside the federal building, and the other had his career derailed and destroyed. It goes to show how a federal cover-up is facilitated. And again, I continue and consistently, I'm reminded of U.S. Customs Agent Ramon J. Martinez and the Finders cult, which is exactly the same story almost. And well, it's not the same story, as far as I'm just referencing the cover up, right? And how they derail, honest investigators, and with credible evidence. They'll just destroy the evidence if they have to. And so yeah, it's par for the course when it comes to federal involvement in some of these scandals and ritualized murders, such as Delphi. But yeah, so I believe that evidence, of course, there was a very you know clear trail of evidence that was overtly known to law enforcement, that demonstrated this nexus between Brad Holder and at least 4 other suspects. And these individuals all seem to have participated in these murders. And so let's see. Wasn't some of the cops in the Rodney King incident also owns cops that call their little group within the LAPD the Vikings? I swear I remember that, but I need to relook into. I will have to relook into that as well, because that it does make a lot of sense that there would be a lot more of these kind of fraternal organizations within the context of these even if it is just local PD, local police, the prison guards, whatever the case is. It makes a lot of sense that there would be fraternal organizations that they would belong to, just if only because of the implication of what, if you're a compromised asset within that landscape, then you're very useful at the very least. And so, of course, you might want to oversaturate that landscape with compromised assets, and that would make a lot of sense that they would be involved in some fraternal organization, especially if, let's say you shared loyalties with this group, but also, you kind of, again, everyone is sort of on the same page when it comes to, y- you know, um, insulating themselves, right, from exposure. And so just that alone will cause people to really act out in ways that they might not otherwise have acted out in, right? And so let's see here. Beyond that, it's that nexus that I just mentioned. I guess we could finish up because I am going to end up doing an episode with William Ramsey tomorrow on Delphi, actually. So at 3, I think it's at 3 my time, so 6 o'clock Eastern time. So you guys definitely check that out because I'll be getting much more into the details in regard to the Delphi murders and be able to kind of paint the picture in a more patient way. And so hopefully you'll enjoy that. And I love talking to William. Anytime I get the chance, we always end up having a wonderful conversation. But I gotta drink coffee, man. I'm tired. So anyway, before we get out of here, there's one other thing. I could sit here and just continue to talk about Delphi all freaking day, so I probably won't do that. What I do want to do though is let's see, what was it I wanted to show you guys? I know the main thing was that beyond Trump and Davos, and I've been wanting to kind of make this argument. Yeah, I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you, thank you. He says he's gonna check out the William Ramsey episode. But yeah, so let's see. One last thing that we could go over would be this. I had mentioned the Eye of the Chicken Hawk and the Spartacus International and the Elm Guest House. It's worthwhile talking about because in 1982, the Metropolitan Police in southwest London began to surveil a townhouse owned by a German couple named Haroon and Carol Kassir. I'll share this with you because there are a few pictures too, and it's kind of worthwhile. All right. And so the proprietors of a suburban hotel called the Elm Guest House, displaying a sign out front which read Spartacus Club, welcome. The house in Rocks Lane is in an Edwardian terrace with a small sign on the door saying Spartacus Club, welcome. It was empty yesterday afternoon. It looks like an old clip from maybe a newspaper article. Suspected of operating as an illegal brothel, the Elm Guest House was raided in June 1982 and found to be providing guests with a menu of fetishes they could indulge in with boys as young as 10. 23 guests were detained during the raid, found occupying a suite of bedrooms festooned with whips, chains, and sex paraphernalia, and amongst communal areas such as a lounge bar, spa, and sauna facility, and a screening room for pornography. So again, it sounds like Kincora. It sounds like the Finder's Warehouse. If you remember the Finder's Warehouse, it looked like, again, some sort of area that was outfitted as a studio, as a film production studio for pornographic videos. That's what it resembled, and that is exactly what the federal agents who conducted the raid, their ultimate conclusion was that this was outfitted for the purposes of child pornography. And then there was also, it was very strange. They had this what's it called? Not a podium, but it was in the middle of the room, right? And it was as if it was kind of a ritual room, and lining the walls of the ritual room were jars of piss and shit, right? And yeah, that tends to resurface in the context of these sadistic networks of child abuse. I do not want to know why. It's very much within the vein of the occult and the ritualistic practices, but that along with animal sacrifice, it just, of course, it blends together as it typically does. And so it was initially reported that according to police sources, 3 of the guests detained had been parliamentary ministers, and a fourth a member of the Queen's royal staff. These reports were swiftly walked back, however, in official statements made subsequently by authorities involved. Whoever these guests may have been, they were all released without charge, and soon after reporting on the incident ceased, possibly upon intervention by Attorney General Sir Michael Hevers. The German proprietors Harun and Carol Kassir were charged for keeping a disorderly house in possession and production of child pornography. The latter charges were dropped in 1983 after over 7 hours of video footage seized as evidence from the Elm Guest House was ruled inadmissible in court. That same year, a Tory MP named Geoffrey Dickens had handed the Secretary of Home Office Leon Britton a dossier on members of Parliament and the Queen's royal staff alleged to have been part of a VIP pedophile ring. Little was made of this at the time, but 30 years later this dossier would serve, at least in part, as the basis for an investigation into historic allegations of child abuse at the hands of a VIP pedophile ring linked to Parliament and the Prime Minister's office, Margaret Thatcher. Now, if you know, Margaret Thatcher has deep ties with, I forget the organization's name, but of course Jimmy Savile was involved, and it was within the context of the psychopath machine. And was it Steve Smith? Was that his name? Trying to remember now, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense that Margaret Thatcher would be implicated, and especially her, her parliament, and her prime minister's office, I mean. And so yeah, let's see it once again. Public figures tied to child sex organizations, of course. So shortly after handing this dossier to the minister responsible for overseeing the domestic intelligence services such as MI5, Geoffrey Dickens started to receive death threats, and his home was burglarized multiple times. Then in November 1983, his name and other personal details were found in a notebook belonging to a hitman named Arthur Hutchinson, a fugitive wanted for a triple homicide. Because of this, a security team had been assigned to Dickens for a number of weeks until Hutchinson was apprehended. This is just extraordinary, honestly, man. But how much does it just share signatures with Detroit and Kinkora? I mean, it's fascinating, really. But let's see. My friend Donnie Gecko says, I don't want to be intrusive by asking you if one day if you would talk more about substance abuse from your personal experience. I'm a former opiate user too, hence my question. That's kind of funny that you could tell that opiates were a soft spot for me at one point in my life. But yeah, I struggled, no doubt, for a time, and it happened very quickly, and not at all my expectation. But when you find yourself idolizing that celebrity culture that really leads to the downfall of, man, I worshipped the 27 Forever 27 Club, basically, right? And when you have that mindset growing up, and when I was a kid, I for sure had to, I had to go through this awakening process where I really had to face reality, but I wasn't ready for the longest time. And I had, how it is when you're abusing substances, and it creates this egomaniacal perspective, and it really just creates this psychological prison. and it's something that is so difficult to break free from. But it honestly, I think it takes having people in your life that are worth changing for. you know, like, man, that matters probably more than anything, right? Is to be surrounded by people who, you know, can kind of influence you to, well, no, not influence you, but remind you what matters, right? And I think that, man, inevitably, I got tired of really hurting the people that love me most, right? And that just tends to occur whenever you're on that path, right? Everyone who cares for you becomes collateral damage to a certain extent. So I had to, some people go through harsher consequences to see the error of their ways and kind of, you know, wake up to the unfortunate place they're in, and then do what it takes to kind of recondition yourself to, to change those just terrible habits that you've formed over time, right? Which is the most difficult thing to do. And I think that for many substance abuse, people with uh, just dealing with substance abuse, I think that's kind of the most difficult part, right? So, um, yeah, I don't know. I think just making sure that you replace those habits with other habitual patterns that are truly worthwhile. So I try. I'm like, okay, let's get a workout routine in, right? And then you create that habitual pattern for every day. I'm going to look in the mirror and tell myself I'm a piece of shit until I get my workout in. I know that's a very negative way to approach it, but there's probably a more uh, psychologically positive way to approach yourself, and but I think there's such a weak-minded uh, connection to substance abuse that um, you kind of have to rebuild you, you know your willingness to be very, you know I think it honestly, you have to be, this is why I say you have to be headstrong so often and remain vigilant, because it is this weakness psychologically that disgusts me. And since I've gone through it, I recognize it so quickly in other people, and I run from it, man. It fucking scares me because the last thing I need is to, kind of resort back to that mental state, and back to this sort of, uh, you know, negative pattern that only leads you toward, honestly, a self-destructive path, right? So, anyway, it definitely just takes. Yeah, you can be a functional addict. I mean, you could be. I'm not saying you're an addict, but you can abuse substances and be functional, no doubt. Um, right, and that makes it a lot more difficult to change your ways if you're functional as well, and you still have. If for any reason some people can abuse substances, and it doesn't, overall it doesn't really affect them negatively, except for maybe physically. Um, But yeah, and people are different. Uh, that's for sure. Like, we all have a very different psychological framework. Now, others are more similar to each other, but clearly, we all have different brain chemistry that factors into, these addictive qualities and how they kind of play out in our lives. But yeah, I will say that, you know, even if it's just the disappointment of I expected more from myself. And that should be worth, you know, addressing honestly, and for your own well-being, you know. If you can't answer your own questions honestly internally, you have a problem, right? Like that's kind of what how I feel. And so I am rigorously honest with myself, probably to a detriment, you know. But thank God for that. And honestly, man, I couldn't be more grateful for my ability to be so critical of myself, because at the very least I think it helps me improve. It's a little bit, as I said, detrimental as far as, you know, you're not quite as positive as you probably should be sometimes. But in regard to yourself personally, but you know, if you're not on a path attempting to improve at all times and reflect on what your role has been in these negative outcomes for yourself, then it's going to be very difficult, just life in general. So I appreciate you, asking me to kind of talk about that, because I had a lot of I had a lot of other things that were kind of making me feel a bit scatterbrained this morning. I'll be honest. I had a bunch of stuff pulled up, and I kind of yeah, I wasn't quite sure what direction I wanted to go. I've been wanting to share a few different things with you guys for quite some time, so I'll have to just when you have like 72 tabs pulled up, it's a little bit it's a little overwhelming. So I need to be a little more efficient with what I bring to the table whenever we do these streams. But anyway, I appreciate you guys as always, and like I said, we will end up talking about. I really wanted to go through that Pilgrim Society episode, or not episode, but long form article at some point, because there's so much that I left on the table when I covered that episode that I really felt would be the perfect platform for us to kind of wade through a lot of the details, because again, it's going to provide us with this kind of nexus of power brokers that are truly, functioning behind the scenes and operating as puppet masters on the world stage, and sheds, much needed as far as transparency in regard to, these political actors that people tend to, unfortunately, blindly trust and follow and support and defend. Even worse, defend them, right? um, defend them against people who have their own best interest at heart, which is just fascinating to me, but a part of the conditioning and ideological subversion aspect of it also. Yeah, it's status quo par for the course these days in psyop season. But unfortunately, this has long been the case in the state of the world. So we're just now kind of discovering, at least in many ways, right, when the veil falls to the wayside and you kind of discover the true power brokers and the true system as it functions and is structured covertly. But then you almost realize that there is this international framework that is intended to subvert all of global society, right? And that is in every way that you can imagine. So philosophically, ideologically, politically, you know, it's just, yeah, it's something that I will forever be obsessing over, I believe. And so again, if we can trace these special interest groups and these very prominent individuals in the Rockefeller, Mellon, Luce, Rothschild, Cecil, Windsor, right? These families, these dynastic families that have been deciding our fate for far too long. We need to finally contend with the the true structure, and that is my goal. And so again, when I criticize each side of the aisle politically, honestly, equally, it just tends to matter who is who is kind of in power at the time is who usually gets the most attention, and that's how it should be. Always attempting to hold power accountable, despite their political ideology and the preference you may have personally, and then to attempt to avoid confirmation bias as much as we can, but still, provide you know credible, uh, um, just what I believe to hopefully corroborate a lot of these alternative theories that we tend to find far more plausible. That's the goal of all of this. So anyway, I appreciate you guys as always. We will inevitably discuss a lot more of these power brokers in the next live stream, because I was hoping to trace, of course, the kind of the connections between the Rockefellers and the creation of the United Nations organization, because it's been really just holding my attention for quite some time, mainly due to the fact that I believe that the current structure is again, it's been entirely manufactured by special interest groups, and so once you are under that impression, no longer do you fall into the trap, and you tend to remain consistently skeptical. So that's a good place to be, I think, psychologically, and that is so anyway, well, as we sort of attempt to uh kind of deal with the new psyops, and one after another, as they continue to consistently flood the landscape. Appreciate you, my friend. Always, man. Thank you. And yeah, I think we need to really just remain skeptical and keep our eyes open, and remind ourselves, you know, we can never accept these things at face value. There's always a deeper story here. So I appreciate you guys as always. For sure, go and subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the Rumble, go support Jose, listen to No Way Jose, support Jules, go listen to Grey Pilled. And like I said, check out the show with William tomorrow. Awesome, man. Appreciate you. He says, great show last night. Awesome to see you guys doing morning shows now as well. Interesting to see which stories each of you pick out to discuss. Thanks for all the content. Of course, my friend. And exactly, abrogate these heads on a swivel. That's right. It's the only way to function in this, the land of spooks. But anyway, all right, guys. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the next stream for sure. I'll probably end up doing. If I don't end up joining Jose in the next day or two, then I'll for sure be there on Saturday. But yeah, that's the plan. So I appreciate you guys, and like I said, check us out. Be on the show with William at 3 tomorrow. So thanks again, and I'll catch you later.